CQUniversity respectfully acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which we live, work and learn. We pay our respects to the First Nations people and their elders, past, present and future.
Thanks for watching this video on Listening to the Voice. I'm Graeme Innes, Chancellor of CQUniversity. Today's guest is a three-time Paralympic gold medalist and two-time Commonwealth Games gold medalist. He has won over 40 marathons and in 2009 crawled the Kokoda track to raise awareness about men's health. A corporate speaker and TV presenter, he is also a disability activist and the chair of the National Disability Insurance Agency. I'm talking, of course, with Kurt Fearnley. Welcome, Kurt. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Graeme. Today, though, I think I'm speaking as a friend to Graeme Innes. How's that?
Yeah, well, that's great. No, very happy to have you speak in that role. Kurt, how do you see the Voice to Parliament making a practical difference in Australia?
I think when it comes from a disability perspective, I immediately think that it's almost accepted knowledge that when we get the person with the disability's voice to be recognised in the way that they are able to live their life, we get better outcomes, we get a healthier ecosystem, and I think it's genuinely accepted community-wide that is the case. Now, I think that the most reasonable argument for the Voice is that we acknowledge First Nations people. When we are fortunate, I'm coming to you from a Wabakal country, that has been able to seep into community and just create this beautiful part of who we are. Beyond acknowledging, we as a community need to start listening. And when it comes to things that are affecting First Nations people, having a structure within the government to be able to advise on that is the most reasonable thing that I think anybody could ask for. And how that makes a difference on the ground, well, for the very first time, being able to hear, say, a First Nations people with disabilities at government level, that is equally as simple as it is revolutionary. It's a voice that we are not hearing. It's a reason why we are not getting the hopes, the desired outcomes that we all fought for 10 years ago when it comes from disability services. And I don't think you can underestimate the impact of that.
I'm glad you drew that analogy, Kurt, because it's one I often draw, and it applies to any sector of our community, doesn't it? I mean, we get better outcomes for women when we listen to women's voices. We get better outcomes, as you said, for people with disabilities, and so when you frame it in that way, it seems such an obvious and reasonable thing to do.
And in the absence of that, though, when you are living in a space in the world where that voice is not heard, to create a structure that turns that on, I say it's equally part as simple and reasonable, but also potentially revolutionary in that individual's life. And I always think, Graeme, we're living in a no, right? Like, we are living, the status quo is where we are right now. The no vote is where we are right now. And in many instances of closing the gap, in many instances of hearing the voice of First Nations people from around this country, we are failing. So no is an acceptance. No is we are okay with the status quo of failure. And I know that you don't accept that. I don't accept that, and I think it is reasonable to hope that Australia sees the opportunity of turning that fail around.
Yeah, I know that a significant part of your own life experience has been working with and spending time with First Nations Australians. From that experience, what caused you to come to the view that you support the Voice to Parliament?
Some of the most valuable years of my teaching, I would teach as an educator in remote areas, and I loved it. I think the brash, confident way that First Nations people embrace disability, like it is. I would be the fellow who walks no good, or something like that. It is a very open, accepting culture when it comes to disability, and it's been some of my most amazing experiences when you get to learn from First Nations people about connection to country, about connection to mob and family, and connection to 60,000 years of history. Now, I feel grateful. I feel incredibly grateful that it has been a part of my life. I have spent 25 years competing for Australia. I want that green and gold, that Australian uniform, to reflect that experience in a better way. And I think that when it comes to enhancing the voice of First Nations people, this structure that is in its simplest form is an advisory board from First Nations around the country into government to amplify that story, and it's one piece of a continued story, and that is that we as a community, we as a government, as First Nations people, come from around the country to plot a blueprint on how we can be better, and how we as a country can unite in areas that are obviously still raw and real. And the Uluru Statement for the Heart is one of the most beautiful documents that I've ever read. It is incredibly generous. It is incredibly kind, and it could have been very differently. Rightly, it could have been a completely different pathway. But the pathway that was shown and allows us to go through as a people starts with voice, and it starts with mainstream, with those who are non-First Nations being able to sit back and listen. And if we can't listen, then I don't know how we as a country get to reflect, the values that we all love outside. And Graeme, you're a sports fan, right? You're a fan of where Australia sits within the international community.
Yeah.
I'm really worried about the day after this referendum, and the story. If we don't take this invitation to move forward together, how this will be reflected into an international community. When we invite people to help us move forward, and then we fall over at the first hurdle, it won't be a great day.
It won't be a great day, and particularly when a number of other countries with First Nations peoples have adopted a similar mechanism. So it's not as if it's a first in Australia. I'm glad though you referenced that that view of disability by First Nations people. I, as a person with a disability myself, regard it as one of the great gifts that First Nations Australians have given us, because there isn't the same negative view of disability that we have in the broader Australian community. It's just like, oh yeah, there's Graeme. He can't see, but it doesn't really make that much difference to how he lives his life. And you're relating a similar experience.
It is very robust, and I didn't. I'm a white fella out of the middle of New South Wales, out of the middle of Wiradjuri. I had the incredible gift to grow up crawling around this beautiful country, and but when I first started to engage with disability in remote areas, it's refreshing. It's very robust. It's very to the point, but it is very warm, and it is very welcoming.
Kurt, there'll be a great deal of information about the voice out there. I mean, there's already a lot of it out there, and there'll be more before we go to the polling booths. How do you recommend that people research this topic before they vote? Because it really it's not the best way to proceed to if you're uncertain, to hold to the status quo. What do you recommend that people do in order to inform themselves?
Graeme, I got a text message last week and it said, "If you don't know, vote no." And I could have thrown my phone away. If we are given the gift to progress as a country, it's so with such limited ways. The last referendum that we had is over 20 years ago, and it failed, and it continued the relationship to the monarchy that we currently have. A change of recognizing First Nations people, of being able to ensure that we don't just acknowledge who they are, their contribution to the Australian culture, but also commit to listening going forwards. We don't get the opportunity to create this change every single day. So if you don't know, go find out. If you don't know, have a look at the Uluru Statement from the Heart and read it with a tone of an invitation, that this is a document that allows a truth telling, but it also allows the ability to heal, and it invites everybody to kind of first acknowledge where we have got a lot of things wrong, but also how we can go forward together. And then my hope is that in the next generation of Australian athlete that's out there, or anyone that flies, the Australian kind of presence on an international setting, that there can be an honesty about who we are, and we can tell this story of 60,000 years instead of now telling a story of a couple of 100 years, and then glazing over, what is some pretty poor treatment of those that we hear before.
Kurt, always great to talk to you, and particularly on this topic, really informative, and thanks for giving us your time today.
No problems, Graeme, anytime.
The views and opinions expressed in this video are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.